to the Briefing Room. I'm your host, Bill Froehlich from WTCM Radio News. It's our weekly roundup of some of the stories that are making headlines all across northern Michigan. And with me at the table this week, Jeremy McBain from the Petoskey News-Review. Thanks for coming back, Jeremy.
Thanks for having me, Bill.
Good to see you. We've moved on to spring for the most part.
Have we?
In some places. Not in the UP this week.
or in my part of
Petoskey. We're in the one corner of Leelanau, but we've been watching the snowfall totals, and you guys in Petoskey are way ahead of the rest of us in terms of breaking records. Everyone else, we talked to the Weather Service yesterday, and Traverse City's not close, Gaylord's not close, but Petoskey has done it.
Yeah, Petoskey did it. We thought that Petoskey was going to do it earlier in the week, and this is an interesting story to me because I've been receiving so many phone calls.
More interesting than you thought it was going to be.
Yeah, more interesting than I thought. We have this graphic on the front page of our paper that shows the record of snowfall was 70-71. I think it was 183 inches, 83.9 around there. And we were showing how close in this little graphic we were getting each day. We were updating.
Building the intensity.
Yeah, building it up for people. And at the end of last week, the graphics show we had about maybe an inch to go. So over the weekend after we got that snow, we thought, well, this was a really long winter, and at least let's get something out of it, and we're gonna break a record today. So we called up the National Weather Service to say, all right, how much snow did we get, and did we break the record? And because we've got this, we've been putting this graphic on the front page, and so the Weather Service says, we're sorry, but we made a mistake, and in our reporting to you guys, and you're actually got less snow than what we told you from our reporting area. So we had to adjust the graphic on the front page, and we put a little story in the paper about how
5 inches melted off the face of the earth.
5 inches melted off, and we didn't make the record that day. And I figured, people would be a little bummed, but they'd read the story. But they saw the headline. We didn't make the record. They saw the graphic had changed, and I think the next thing they did was pick up the phone, call me, and start yelling at me. How could you make an error like that? I had to explain. Did you read the story before you called me? No. Why don't you read the story first, and then you can call me up and you find out that the National Weather Service actually has been reporting it to us wrong. But anyhow, that passed up, and the very next day we got another snowstorm, and we beat the record. So, yay!
But now no one believes it.
Yeah, well, I think they believe it this time because we've been very upfront with them. This is where we're getting our numbers from. We get them from the National Weather Service. We don't have. I don't send Rachel Brown, the news editor, out into the middle of the field with a ruler, and of course that would be funny. We might want to try that.
I was going to say next year.
Next year
we're not going to get taken by the Weather Service again next time.
Yeah, Rachel, you're going out next year,
I fully support that effort.
Yeah. So we've been very upfront with it, and we beat the record this time. But the interesting thing about it is there are two locations in Petoskey where they do observations and they report into the National Weather Service. There's one down by the water, and there's one up by North Central Michigan College. And they're off by several inches. And we're going to explore that a little more of why is it that a location just a couple miles away from another location is off by, in some cases, like 4 inches.
Do you know which is the official
they're going with
reading?
They're going with the one at North Central Michigan College, which would be the one that's over the record. The one over at actually they're both over the record. The one by the waterfront is by a lot more over the record, and then the one at North Central Michigan College, it was just now past the record.
Maybe that's where the data got messed up.
It is actually. It was the one
they were giving you the wrong.
Yeah, it was one coming from the college observation area.
Huh.
But mistakes happen. So, it being media business, we know we're human. We make mistakes. I'm not going to pick on the Weather Service too much about it. I just thought it was funny.
People give you grief every now and then.
Yeah. If this is what they're gonna give me grief about, okay.
There are worse things.
I'll deal with that. And we looked, around the area, and Charlevoix had such different numbers than Petoskey, and Boyne City and East Jordan. They all have such different numbers they're reporting on. To us, it's fascinating, and according to our readership numbers, it's fascinating to them too. Of just how you can be in one location, and a mile away, there's such a difference in precipitation that's coming down.
Yeah.
So we're having a little bit of fun with it here in this never-ending winter.
Going on, 7 months of snow now?
We were talking about that yesterday. We recorded that it started snowing in Petoskey and Charlevoix area November 1st.
Okay.
So
you avoided the October snow.
Yeah, it was pouring rain October, and then November 1st hit and it turned to snow, and it's been the ice planet Hoth ever since. I'm expecting AT-ATs coming through Middletown soon.
I would like to bring a camera up for that. Let us know when that happens.
Oh, that'd be great, front page news.
That'd be awesome. That kind of speaks to a larger issue, just about relationships with readers and how communication goes and what they call you about. Complaints, criticism, compliments.
I every time I think I've heard it all, I find out I haven't. I get some interesting phone calls, interesting letters, and you just never know what it's going to be. Yeah. I mean, there are times where people call me up, and if you make a mistake, and you know this from your career, if you make a mistake, readers and viewers in Northern Michigan are not afraid to call you up and call you out on it. Yep. And I appreciate that, because we want to be as correct as we possibly can, and we are human, so we do make mistakes. Right. And I tell my staff that all the time. Look, I'd like you to try and be as mistake-free as you can, but I understand you are human. Let's just, you make a mistake where you're going to misspell a word, but let's correct it as soon as possible. Be upfront when we made a mistake. So they're not afraid to call me up when we make those sorts of mistakes. But then there's the other phone calls that we get that are interesting. There's some interesting characters in Northern Michigan. I mean, I get phone calls for a long time there from a guy who was convinced that his neighbor was a witch and was casting spells on him. I get phone calls from people who are convinced that the UN black helicopters are flying over their house, or that their phones are tapped.
I'm guessing all three of those examples are so far unsubstantiated.
Yeah, and they generally come from the same guy, so.
Okay. So there you go.
It's sometimes a lot of fun when that phone rings, or you see that email pop up in your inbox. What's it going to be? And a lot of times, too, readers, because we can't be everywhere, readers will give us some fantastic story ideas, so we always encourage them to give us a call. They'll call us up and say, well, did you know about such and such fire that happened last night at 3 in the morning? No, we didn't. And we wouldn't have known about it unless they hadn't called us up, so we can follow up on it. So I appreciate when they do that. Yeah. But I do get some interesting ones.
I bet. Well, let's talk about some of the stories that have made the headlines of the paper in recent days and weeks. You were telling me before we started about a new project going up in the Headlands that someone wants to develop?
Yeah, the Emmett County Board of Commissioners has been looking at doing some redevelopment at the Headlands Park and the Dark Sky International Dark Sky Park up near Mackinac City for a while now. And I mean, they demolished. There was a building at the Headlands that was very popular for weddings, and they demolished that. But they were looking at various projects to put up there, and the problem is they haven't done any feasibility studies on it to determine, is this going to be a good investment for our money?
You're talking about the developers haven't?
No, the county hasn't.
Okay.
And so we put out a few editorials that said, maybe you should do a feasibility study. Let's make sure that we're spending our money correctly on this, and that we're going to get good bang for our buck, especially since you're going to be using taxpayer dollars for it. They haven't done that, and recently they decided to go ahead, and they're using a $15 million bond, and $7 million of it is going to be used for projects up in the headlands to build, I believe it's a new building up there. Still no feasibility study on it. So we're going to be exploring, well, what is it that you know that you're not sharing with the community, and that they should probably know that you really want to push this project and build it.
About why it's so great, why it's a guarantee.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they say that they've spoken with a lot of business leaders up in Mackinac City area, and that they're really supportive of it. Okay, fine. Let's explore that a bit more and show us what it is that you know. The readers need to know that, and I encourage them to do that. You know, just show us the numbers. And also part of that $50 million is some other improvements throughout the county, such as paying for some projects with the ambulance service. And the ambulance service is another big issue up there, because they're looking at doing trying to find more funding for the ambulance service up there, and it's been kind of controversial, a little interesting, because they would come up with some numbers that didn't make sense, even to the Allied Ambulance Service. Was saying, where are you getting these numbers from? And that project, we've been following that project a little bit. But a lot of this is, going back to that $50 million bond. Thing about the bond is it doesn't have to go before the taxpayers, or before the voters, I'm sorry. But voters can set up, I guess, like a petition or a referendum. I can't remember the exact legal term for it, but I think it's 10% of the voters in the last election, and then it, I think they'll force a vote on it. But at this time, I'm not real familiar with exactly the legal language on it, but the $15 million doesn't have to go before the voters, and they're just they're pushing forward on this project.
What about the Petoskey Point project? Anything new with our it's a Grand Rapids owner that took it over?
Yeah,
Amash,
yep. Very interesting guy. He is very upfront with us on it. He came in, he met with us and said, I've never done a project like this. He came right out and said, I've never done a project like this, but I don't go into projects without having a good team on board with me. So he says, I'm going to put together a team to look at this project, and I'm not going to. And he says, I'm not going to sit here and tell you exactly what I'm going to put in there, because I really know yet. And we're going to take a look at it, and we're going to study it, and we're going to figure out what's best for the site. And that's a little different than what some of the other developers have come in and said. They've said, we're going to put this in there, and this is how we're going to do it. This guy's come in and saying, we're going to really look at this. And so he's putting together his team on it.
It's interesting, though, that the purchase seemed to happen rather quickly.
It did.
And he went forward with it, and he didn't have a plan yet, as opposed to the traditional way of doing it.
Yeah, well, he said that he had been looking at the project, at the property for a while, and he owns a second home down near it, and he's in love with Petoskey, and he thought, that just it's such a prime location.
Something's got to go.
Yes, and something high quality needs to go there. And he went to, I guess he went to bid on it the second time. Once the first owner of it, whose name has escaped me right now, it kind of defaulted on it, and it went up for resale. I guess he missed it just barely on bidding on it, and it was and the second owner took it on. So he just kind of sat in the background watching the project process move forward. And then as soon as that second owner realized, it's not going to happen for me, he was able, the realtor and him got together and he was able to operate.
It seems to me too, though, that's especially because he knows the property, he knows the area, and had been paying attention. He's got to have some ideas of what could go there. I mean, we talked. Was it the cottage company that was talking about?
Yeah, and he's a good guy. The cottage company is a good guy too.
I'm just wondering if at some point they'll come back into this partnership with. They already had somewhat of a plan, knowing what they wanted, so it's not like we're starting from a hole in the ground. With what do we do with this project? I mean, there were some ideas already out there, so there's a starting point at least. Yeah,
there's a starting point. I don't know about one of the other developers coming back teaming up. I kind of doubt that would happen.
Is there a timeline? I mean, are we looking at like
not really?
Whenever he gets around with it?
Yeah, well, they came up with a new name for it, and God, what was it? Sunset. Something. I can't remember the name. I'm sorry, I can't remember the name.
It'll always be Petoskey Point or the hole in the ground until something's actually there, I guess.
And he was putting together a team, and I guess the timeline that he had originally given us was that he was going to take a couple months to put together his team. I would imagine if he doesn't have the team together now, he's close to it. So I think that probably as we go into the summer, we're going to start hearing more about it. But these are just guesses on my part. He really, I take him to be a kind of guy that really doesn't want to just move fast on the project. He wants to take his time. He seems like he wants to take his time and plan it out.
The hole in the ground's been filled, though, right?
Yeah.
Is it the fence? I haven't been up there in a few months. Are the fences down? Is it like a park area?
Well,
what is it now?
It looks nice, actually. It's not a park area because it's got a fence around it, but it doesn't have. If you've been up to see it in the past, it had this like industrial type fence around it with a blue tarp on it. That's gone. What they have around it is a fence that's a little more decorative. Looks almost like a wrought iron fence, and the property has been seeded. And I don't want to say landscape, but it's been, it's got grass that's grown in on it, and they created a grade that goes down into the hole to support the walls that had been constructed earlier, because there were some signs those might be failing. So that's been solved by kind of putting in a grade in, like a slow sloping. Okay. There's still somewhat, I don't want to say a hole. I mean,
more of a divot.
Yeah, more of a divot. It's going to be a very interesting pond once all the snow melts. And,
I'm just wondering if it's going to, I was envisioning this beautiful grassy park area, and then people will be all upset that we're digging up the park area next season or something like that.
No, it's not quite a beautiful grassy park area. I mean, it's
just
looks a lot better than yeah.
All right. Well, Jeremy, let's take a break here on the briefing room. When we come back, we'll talk more about some of the stories up north in the Petoskey area and some of the changes to the paper with some new staff coming in. So we'll talk about that when we come back. We'll be right back on the briefing room.
Continuing financial support for Up North TV comes from East Bay Charter Township, the City of Traverse City, Elmwood Charter Township, and the Charter Township of Garfield. Their support makes it possible for our communities to create and enjoy local programming. Help bring awareness, promote your cause, or share your craft. Get started at upnorthmedia.org.
Welcome back to the briefing room. I'm Bill Froehlich from WTCM Radio News, talking with Jeremy McBain from the Petoskey News-Review. Jeremy, thanks again for coming in. Talking about some of the stories making headlines, and we'll also shift gears and talk a little bit about changes at the Petoskey News here in a second. But one other story that made news, I guess both state and locally, governor's commitment to recycling got some attention this week. He put out a press release, and as I always do, I kind of scan the list of appointees and see if by any random chance there's anyone from our area, and usually there's not. But this time, one of the, I think, 9 was from Emmett County. And you've got an appointee for the recycling effort here in your neck of the woods.
Yeah, I can't say her last name very well.
I know, Elisa
Seltzer, yep. I don't know why I always have problems with her last name.
I've had problems too, it's all right.
Yeah, first of all, it's very nice to know that Lansing remembers that there's more to the state of Michigan past further north than Grand Rapids. But good, I thought it was a good choice for the recycling committee like that. She really knows her stuff. There's a great program up in Petoskey, a great recycling program up there. and a great facility up there. Just a good appointment on the governor's part.
And you guys had a story with her in, was it, you said Wednesday's paper?
Yesterday's paper, yeah.
Yep.
So that's Wednesday.
That's Wednesday. Is there we should put a chart in there now of the governor's appointees from northern Michigan and see how accurate we can get that.
Yeah.
If the governor cooperates, the office. Actually, that reminds me when Governor Schneider took over and we started getting press releases from the new press office. We were, the thing that I had contacted them about was appointees. They kept sending out these press releases that were 3 or 4 sentences long, and there's such and such an appointee has been named. This person has been named, and that was really all it said.
Yes.
It wouldn't say where they were from, or it would say click this link to go to this website to find out where. And I finally called after the 4th or 5th press release, and I said, "Can you just tell us the hometown?" I mean, I realize clicking a link is not a big deal, but when you get 100 emails a day, the last thing you want to do is go digging for what should be a one-line,
exactly.
one-sentence answer,
Yes,
right?
yes, I noticed that as well, but then
Okay.
I noticed the change. So that was you. Good job, Bill.
I don't know if I helped or hurt, but
you sped up my job a little bit more because I'd have to, I'd open it up. Here go, click on it.
and with as often as the internet seems to be down or our own web servers crashing, it's just a pain in the butt sometimes.
And I get an average of 500 to 800 emails a day, so got to do it for every one of them.
Yeah, that's tough.
Yeah.
But I got so much grief about that too. All you have to do is click on the link, and it'll take you to their, our full press release. Why don't you just send us the full press release?
Yes. Yeah.
It's a crazy concept, but yeah. Well, let's talk about some of the changes at the paper. You told me before we started here, you guys have made some new hires, some new additions to the Petoskey News-Review.
Yes. I had a few people who had been with us for a while leave to further their careers, which I think is fantastic.
It's always bittersweet.
It's always bittersweet, but it's nice to see them, pursuing their passions. And they both moved to Florida. This was in the middle of winter, and they both moved to Florida. I wonder why. They were very good.
And by middle of winter, you mean like 6 weeks ago, right?
Yes, yes.
But anyway, I digress.
But I brought in a new political reporter, and his name is Craig Courier, and he comes to us from California, actually.
In the middle of winter.
Yeah, in the middle of winter. He was, he was so excited when he got here because he saw that the weather forecast showed that it was going to snow, and he was so excited to be able to see snow, which caused us in the newsroom to call him all sorts of names. But he got his wish. He got to see snow, and then he pointed out to us because he's got just like the spring coat he always wears, and we pointed out to us that he doesn't have a winter coat. So we've laughed at him for that quite a bit. He comes to us from California. He's been with us for going on 2 weeks now, and at the end of his first week with us, last Friday, he got to have a sit-down interview with the governor. He was very excited about that, and he made a point of telling me that he had been in California for 7 years, I believe it was, and during that entire period of time, he never once got to have an interview with the governor of California, because the governor just doesn't do interviews with newspaper reporters out there. I said, well, 1 week and you're meeting with the governor here in Michigan. It's a good deal.
Yeah.
So he was excited about that. And then I brought in another reporter, Erica Rakowitz. I probably just completely slaughtered her last name.
Sorry, Erica.
Yeah, sorry, Erica.
There will come a time.
Yeah. And she's basically doing a lot of our night side reporting, our education reporting, and so a lot of digital reporting for us. She comes to us from the Detroit area, where she worked for some schools down there doing their press, and she worked for a couple of banks doing their press, basically public relations type stuff. And she's doing a very good job. She's been with us for about 3 weeks now. But we're focusing, what we're doing with the newsroom now is we are focusing on further improving both products. And when I say both products, I mean our print product and our digital products. because we recognize that we've got a growing audience over on the digital side. And that audience demands, as they should, a high quality product for the digital side, particularly since we have a pay meter on our site. Because I just have a philosophical issue with giving away a product that we create for free. I just don't see how you can do that. So I want to make sure that I'm giving people high quality items over in digital, exactly what it is that they're looking for. But at the same time, I don't want to lower the quality of our print product. I want to further improve the quality of our print product. Yep. And this sort of thinking, sadly, seems to be kind of rare in our business anymore. As you see, a lot of these newspapers are switching over to digital at the expense of their print product. And I think they're taking a lot of hits because of that. Yeah. I'm not going to mention any newspaper companies, but you know who you are. So we want to focus on improving both the products. So what we're doing with our team is the newsroom has reporters at the Petoskey News-Review. Some reporters are more focused on the print product. So I would say like 70-80% of their time is spent really concerning ourselves with the print product and really working on very rich, in-depth, enterprise-type stories. Okay. And this is the goal, actually. I mean, it's one that we've just started up over the last couple months. But there's still produced some items for the digital products. And when I say digital products, I have to say products like that because you're talking the website, you're talking mobile apps, texting, social media sites. There's so many different items there. But that's not their main focus. Then I've got a group of people who their main focus is going to be the digital products. You're really working on items that the digital audience wants. Fast news, accurate news, tidbits, little bits of news from around the area, as well as more in-depth, more video, more interactive type media. Gotcha. But they're still putting stuff in for the print product. It's just maybe 20% of their time is spent over on print. The rest of it is spent over on digital. And our theory is that by doing this and creating these expertises amongst various staff members, we're going to see both of our products improve over time. And this is going to be a long-term project. And I encourage feedback from our readers, both in print and on digital, on what it is that they want to see and what it is we're doing good and what it is we're not doing so good and what they think we need to improve upon. And we're going to try and do that and figure out ways that we can do that.
Two things. The first thing that jumps out at me is what I like about that concept is, when you lose a reporter, as you have recently done, that transition can often be really tough. You've got a gap of training and not to mention just a new person trying to get used to the area, knowing what stories are what. But if you've got multiple people with multiple strengths kind of overlapping each other, the impact of one person slipping out maybe not as great. I mean, we saw that in television quite a bit too, especially when we had beat reporters, and we over the years in different companies I've worked for have all had different philosophies about that. But if you've only got one person devoted to one county, and then that person leaves, well, then you're essentially facing the possibility of ignoring that county for weeks and weeks and weeks.
Yes.
Or if you've only got one person who's ever going to cover crime, you face the possibility of ignoring crime or missing some legitimate news for a while. So that's what I'm saying is you've kind of built in some overlap there, which hopefully will sustain that. But my question is that something that ownership, management, including yourself or above you, has dictated? Did they give you some latitude into how you wanted to do that? How did that decision come about to split that digital versus print focus?
Well, I work for probably one of the best media companies in the nation right now. Schurz.
And so do I. Okay, go ahead.
Schurz Communications, based out of Indiana. Okay. They're just fantastic. I can't say enough nice things about them. The reason being is because they don't do a lot of dictating to us, saying you must do it this way. And a lot of newspaper companies do that to their own detriment, because what they try and do is a lot of one-size-fits-all approaches.
Right.
And you see that with some of the failures in media around the nation, is they're trying these one-size-fits-all approaches, which it may work in a big city like, say, Grand Rapids or Detroit, and I'm talking just Michigan here, but that approach is not going to work in, say, Mount Pleasant, Traverse City, Petoskey, because you have different audiences who expect different things and different types of technology too. And our management at overall, the corporate management has that sort of approach of we let our local properties determine what is their best course and how to, they give us an overall goals in that. How are you going to reach that? And I work for a very good publisher and a member of a management team with the Northern Michigan Review, which is our news group for Michigan, which includes Petoskey News-Review, Gaylord Herald Times, Charlotte Courier, which allows us the latitude to be able to implement our own solutions to the various problems that we have in our industry. So they give us a lot of room to work. Yeah. And that's what they've done for me, is said, all right, here's what we want to see. Here's the problems that we want you to read. We want you to improve our products. We want you to get more into digital to meet that growing audience. And we want you to increase the number of stories and actually all of content. How are you going to do that? And how are you going to meet the audience and grow audience too?
And that's up to you.
And
how you get there is up to you.
Exactly. Yeah. And I can't just say, I think we need to do this. No, I have to come in with I have to research it and come in with an action plan. And I respect that they want to see it, because they want to see where are you coming up with this? Right. And that's what we've done. So it's a good way of doing it. We come into it with a plan. But it's not so rigid of a plan too. I got to add this: it's not so rigid of a plan that we can't make tweaks or we can't change it along the way. Because if you go in with a rigid plan, and I've learned this the hard way. If you go in saying this is what we're going to do, and this is exactly how we're going to do it, and this is how we're going to do it for the next 3 years, you're going to fail, because things change. As we know.
I'd like to end on that high note, but I want to hit the low note for one quick minute here, because you mentioned some of the other companies in the media world that don't do things so well, and you've got newspaper colleagues here in the state that kind of gone through some turmoil in the last week. Just take a quick minute or two to tell us about that.
Well, the latest one was Digital First Media, which is based out of, I think, is New York, and they had this project going for several years called the Thunderdome. Don't make me try and explain exactly what it is. I think they just try and come up with neat names and throw it out there. But they just ended it. I think it was April 1st, they came in and just ended it. And now there's a lot of questions about the future of the newspapers that they own. And this was a company that came in with the one-size-fits-all approach. And they own newspapers in Mount Pleasant, Oakland Press, a lot of newspapers downstate, outskirts of Detroit.
What's the parent company?
It's called Digital First. It used to be called JRC, Journal Register Corporation. I think they also own a Grand Traverse Insider too.
Okay.
So there's some question now about the future of their newspapers. Are they going to put them up for sale or not? Because they came in with this one-size-fits-all approach of saying, we're going to go digital first, which is the name of their company. And they pushed so much on digital and at the expense of their print products. And a lot of these areas were still heavily reliant on print. Their readership were heavily reliant on print. Yeah. And I think that was detrimental to them by trying to do that one size fits all. And then you get this end result of this big project they had imploding, which is caused a lot of layoffs, and now questions about their future of their newspapers. And I think you see the same thing with another newspaper company, Advance, which owns MLive, which is Grand Rapids Press, various other newspapers downstate, is they're going this heavy digital approach, on it, and they're trying to roll out this plan across the country at all their publications, and they're seeing massive layoffs, massive losses in their print side. I can't tell you exactly how much, because I don't work for that company, and it's just, it doesn't seem to make sense to me if you're trying to do the same thing at every single one of your media outlets.
Well, it speaks to your philosophy too of diversifying. You know, you're focused on digital and print, and I'm obviously oversimplifying it, but it's like putting all your eggs in one basket. You've got to have some strengths in both areas, and if something does fold, you've got plan B, right?
Yeah, I mean, because this plan, it may not work. It may not be the answer. You know, I may be completely wrong. I hope I'm not, but I may be completely wrong. I don't have an ego big enough to say that I'm not wrong. But if I'm completely wrong, we have plan B, plan C, plan D in place that we can, and our plans are fluid enough that we can switch them up, and we can tweak them, we can change them around to meet the needs of our audience as well as the areas that we cover. And I know that my plan, the way I do things, it may not work in Grand Rapids. It may not work in Detroit. It may not work in some of the other papers that Schurz owns, such as South Bend, Indiana, or Aberdeen, South Dakota, or Imperial Valley out in California. They have their own unique situation,
right,
and they're coming up with their own solutions.
Jeremy, good stuff. I appreciate you being with us again on the program this week. Thanks for making the drive down from Petoskey.
It's always fun.
Jeremy McBain with the Petoskey News-Review here on the Briefing Room. I'm Bill Froehlich from WTCM Radio. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you again next time right here around the table.
Financial support for Up North TV programming comes from the Traverse City Record Eagle. The Traverse City Record Eagle is a daily newspaper providing coverage of local, state, and national news. The Record Eagle is delivered straight to your home or online. Find out more at record-eagle.com.